Good afternoon. Crochet Diva Scotland. Yes, I'm a tiny bit late today getting started, but luckily that means you're here just in time. I'm going to paint a little wreath. It's going to be little blueberries and these sort of eucalyptus leaves that are in this metallic green. And then I'm going to paint some poppies as my florals for today. I've been obsessed with painting poppies today. I don't know if you've been watching the Summer Creative Retreat that's hosted by the Pigeon Letters, but I've been having so much fun watching all of the artists share their talent. I painted with gouache today, first time in a long time. But I think I am back to watercolors for another long time. So far, I'm just using this color Garland by KMS. Place all of my leaves and stems down, and then I will go in with some berries in Frostbite and Icy Blue. Ooh, folk art. Very cool. I feel like gouache goes with that really well, to have lots of layers, patterns. I do have one card that I completed in this style as a reference, sort of in front of me. I'm not trying to reproduce it exactly, but I'm just keeping in mind I want alternating little branches of greens in various sizes with these spaces for my berries. Thank you, Jackie. I did that trick that we talked about for the live hosts of swiping so that I could see your comments better. But that, I think, gave us some difficulties with sound, so let me know if you lose audio at any point. This is watercolor. It's a metallic watercolor, so if I get it on a good angle, you might be able to see it shine. These are handmade watercolors from KMS. She actually has, I think it's a 40, 41, 42, something like that % discount right now on her bundle sets of colors. think I am done with this color, and I'll add my berries now, starting with the light icy blue. I'll add that all the way around and then go in with that darker blue. Yes, if you really want to try KMS watercolors, I do have a discount code that you can use as one of her brand ambassadors. So if you use Palacios paints, you would get $10 off orders, or I think it's 10% off $10 or more. I haven't used my code in a while, so I don't have it off the tip of my tongue, but it is linked in my bio. So you can get to her website and take a look at her colors. I love her metallics more than anything, although she does have some really pretty shades that are matte. I tend to use her greens up quite often. And she has lovely pinks. I think that's her favorite color, so that explains that. All right, a little bit more icy and blue, and then I will go in with that darker blue. It's Frostbite. Okay. Also got a set of stamps, some letters, uppercase, lowercase letters. I think I'm going to, instead of hand letter words like peace or joy, I think I'm going to try stamping this year. We'll see how that goes. Yes, wispy light. That is exactly how I would describe my style as well. Why haven't you painted in a long time? Is that just life's busy? Don't have the time? So there is my little wreath from today and my wreath from before, as sort of an inspiration. I'm gonna go and get my poppies that I did earlier today. The Mint Gardener has a lesson, it's still available, I think for another hour or so, on the creative retreat. So I'm going to paint more of these, but different colors. This is sort of with her lesson, and then I went in with a different color, added the detail that she showed as an option, so I will kind of make one up now. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so to start, I want to get a light green color with my filbert. And plop in some centers sort of quickly so I don't think about where they're going to be pointing just yet. I do want to add a bud, so that one takes a tiny bit more planning. And then maybe one coming in from the top. Now that I have that, I'll go in with a little bit of a darker green, get some bleeds going. And then I'll put that brush away and use my pointed oval. The Mint Gardener used a flat brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of the gouache that I have left over from an earlier paint session today. And I'm watering it down enough so it's going to behave a little bit more like watercolor. And I'll start making those petal shapes. You'd be great doing paint along classes. That really is what I think I excel at, Crochet Divas. That's what I want to do for my first workshop online. I'm thinking next week, maybe Saturday or Sunday, sort of do a little demo of a flower like this at a very slow speed. So you kind of watch and see how I hold the brush, that sort of thing. And then paint another flower with you, and then kind of keep going. I think that's my goal for my class as a sort of way of pacing it. Yeah, I was thinking either Saturday or Sunday morning, my time. I'm in Eastern time, so like a 10 or 11, since I know there's people on the Pacific coast that might want to join in. I still have a few more weeks before I've got to go back to work, so I think maybe I can do one or two of those. And so I'll show you different brushes as well. So if you don't have this particular brush, there are other ways that you can make these shapes. Francesca, you are good at drawing? I don't feel like I'm good at drawing at all. That's something that I need to work on. I am a teacher, yes. I'm a chemistry teacher, also environmental science, but I went to school for chemistry. That is where my heart is. And then this one is our little bud. I'll go a little bit darker. You know, it might sound cool, but last night as I was falling asleep, I was thinking, you know, it would be a good first or second lab. Let's make oobleck and do a claim evidence reasoning kind of structure to what we think our non-Newtonian fluid most resembles. So I don't know if that's your thing. Maybe that's cool. Okay, so that's one layer. I'm going to add in another layer after this dries. This paper does hang on to water pretty well. So I'm going to go do some stems. I'm actually going to lift a tiny bit of this color out so it's not all that dark tone. Okay, so I'll add in some greenery. Okay. Going to start with our bud. Get some stems that frame that. Actually really like that bleed into the petal. It shows off that paper texture really well. Okay. Now for some leaves. Thank you, Laura. Some really fun movement in those poppy leaves. You have your supplies but haven't painted anything yet. Well, I think you should get some water and get some paper ready. Go to it. All right. So some of these centers are dry enough for me to add a little bit of detail like this into the centers, because I can see there's some shine on my petals, so they're still wet. I want to let them dry before going in with a darker shade of blue. So I'll get some more of my green up here. This is Daniel Smith Undersea Green. And then I will give myself a little center. That's still wet. This one I know is dry. So a little center dot. Make it kind of look like a pumpkin or a cute little spider. Lori says, I started about 6 months ago, teaching me patience. Oh, yes, it does. Especially if you're on the more detailed side and want to do what I'm doing here. I think it's best to have 3 or 4 pads of paper and just have different paintings in various stages of drying so that you can always add something to something. This is still slightly damp, but I'm really liking the bleeds, so I'm going to go with that. The first time I did that, Lori, it was a tutorial from this writing desk that's a mountainous landscape, and I think it was 6 or 7 different layers, and I just couldn't wait. I wanted to add my next layer, but to stop myself from bleeding and messing up and adding too much, I had another painting going at the same time, and that helped. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of shadow back into some of these centers that are a little bit more dry. Let's see if this one is ready now. I still see it bloom out, so I'm not going to touch that one. I know those petals are wet, but I think I can get away with another layer of blue for these. And for my earlier poppy, do you ever get almost finished and ruin it? Of course, I do that a lot. Either my brush rolls across my paper and then I've got some paint splatter, which means, well, now we're going to add some little buds there. I'm going to add another leaf. Or I just think, well, maybe I shouldn't have chose that background, something like that. It happens. That's why there's always the back of papers. Since I kind of did my second layer over existing petals in this one, I'm going to try and do things just slightly different on this, mixing it up a bit, seeing what I like. So I'll add a bit of a darker blue. I'm going to try and get my dog's hair off my brush. And let's see. Let's do something like that. Something there. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's all an experiment. Let's see. I know that side's the wet side, so maybe just... Oh, I actually like that. I'm okay with that bleed. Okay, so this is not the typical way I paint poppies, but I think it's gonna be my new go-to. I'm really enjoying the shapes that this brush makes. I know Xena is a black German Shepherd, so I just have to live with it now. Okay. Yeah, I'm liking that. I'll go in with some darker leaves, and then I think I'm not touching this one anymore. It's at a good point. So, get my darker green color. Go over some of this. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you. Yes, this is watercolor. Actually, the blue happens to be gouache that I watered down so much it's basically watercolor at this point. But the green is watercolor. I actually haven't used gouache in over a year, but there's a watercolor gouache drawing digital art creative retreat going on. Okay, I really love these. Right now, I think they're tied for this one as my favorite. Your colors in your living room. That's awesome. This one has really beautiful bleeds. I used a mixture of alizarin, crimson, ultramarine blue, a little quinacridone lake. Love how that just separates beautifully on that paper. So this is still my favorite. Even though I didn't add details, I like that simplicity. That was the first one that I painted. Yeah, I really love those colors. And then I do love a blush pink, a peachy color. I love that too. And blue. I love blue too. So I don't think there's a color that I don't like here. Now, thinking about painting one more thing. Why not? It's summer. I have the time. There we go. I just wanted to add one little thing down there. I will get different paper because I think I already went through half of my supply of this Leather Village handmade paper. Just the last 3 poppies and paintings from yesterday. So I'm gonna stick with my big brush, but I will get my slightly cheaper. I use cold press paper pretty much all the time. I do have hot pressed paper, but that's usually when I know I want to do a watercolor and ink piece that I know I'm gonna add a little bit of something extra to my petals. So like a very quick paint session with watercolor and then add some detail and ink, then I'll use my hot press paper. But I think I've only went through 20 sheets of that in my 3 years of painting. What do they do? So it's mostly the finish of what that paper is going to look like. So you can see some texture on this already. I do have one piece in my Etsy store. That one is for a particular person. They chose 2 paintings that they want together. So that's basically taken. And what I do is if somebody wants a particular piece, then I list it. I go back and forth about adding a bunch of my art and listing it on Etsy. I usually don't have so much interest in my paintings. I think it's because I've been going live every day, and so more people are seeing my art that might want to buy it. But there were several months that I just didn't buy, I didn't have any interest. So if I have a piece that I list on Etsy, I have to pay a tiny bit of money to put it there. And if no one buys it, then it goes inactive. I have to pay again to relist that. So I was thinking about maybe putting a couple up, my recent paintings, and having them there. But what's easiest for me is to say, if you are interested in any of my art, let me know which painting you want, and then I can go and list it for you. And since you're finding me on TikTok, I will take $10 off my usual price of $25, and you can have it for $15, which includes shipping. So I think it's a pretty good deal. That way, I don't spend too much of my money listing things that go unwanted. I hope that explains it well. Right, it's better that my art finds a home and it's loved than just sits in a big pile in a Ziploc to be saved for, I don't know. So I'm going back to this peachy color. I want to paint something, maybe a peony. So what you can do, Heather, you can go to my Instagram. It's the same name if you have Instagram, palacios.paints. And I post stills of almost all of my paintings. I'm a little bit behind just because I paint so much. But if you see something that you like, you can DM me, say, I want this. And if I have it, it's yours. And if I don't, I can recreate it for you. Or you can say, I like this, but I want it in a different color. That type of thing. You can get a commissioned piece if you'd like. I still have several weeks to myself for painting. So if anybody wants anything done, I have the time. So here we go, a peony. Of course. Thinking what else I'd like to add to this. Maybe just a bud and a bunch of leaves for this one. You need this brush. Yes, this one has been very fun. I typically use a Princeton Neptune 8. This is very well loved. I have pretty much used this brush exclusively for 2 years every day. So it just held up pretty well. But this is just fun. It's pure fun. I have a flat brush. Doesn't feel the same. Doesn't get me excited. This one is fun. Let's see. Put something like this. A little bud. Tips for beginners. I think we've talked a few times now on my live about tips for beginners. What I'd say is use good paper, cut it into smaller pieces. So what I have is some Arches paper here. I cut it, I'm gonna cut it again. I could maybe make a bookmark and practice landscape washes. Don't be afraid to use the nice paper. If you're just getting started, I'd recommend something like this, a pad of paper that's not too expensive to build up and practice your brush strokes. You want to get in watercolor practice as often as you can. Try and paint every day. Try and paint with all the different artists that you can find on YouTube. So it might not be a style that you are in love with or a subject that you're in love with, but try going outside the comfort zone that you have, because you're building up some muscles in your hands. I painted a lot by following artists on YouTube my first year. I would just follow lots and lots of tutorials, and then I started branching out and doing things on my own. And I felt comfortable making petal shapes after creating them so many times, or I felt a little bit more comfortable blending colors together. See, this paper is not 100% cotton. You're not going to get the same color bleeds as a higher quality paper, but for me, it's practice with those strokes, not getting rusty, you know? So if you paint once and then come back to it a month later, you are going to feel like you're painting for the first time again. But the more often that you paint and then you take a break, you can get it back. I hope that makes sense. So I'd say paint small, cut up some paper, paint small, paint often, paint different styles. That'll help you find what works for you. And if anybody else has some beginner tips, throw them in the chat. Help me come up with a better answer for next time. Okay, let me get some leaves in there. You don't need too many colors to start with. I feel like I had too many colors and then I would just use them and not mix. I really enjoy mixing watercolors now, finding new combinations and falling in love with those. I do like handmade watercolors a lot now. I didn't start out using them. It took me about a year before I decided I was sticking with this long enough that I'm going to invest in some handmade paints. Kat asked what brush I'm using. Right now I'm using the Petals brush. It's been my favorite for adding leaves quickly. Look at that. It's such a fun leaf. I feel like leaves just flow off the brush with this one. Even though it says petals, right? I use it for leaves. Where do I get my watercolor paints from? And what colors are you using? Okay, so let me go through them again. So the watercolors today that I happen to be using are from Winsor & Newton mostly. So the pink comes from alizarin crimson, a little bit of white gouache. It just happened to be what I had on my palette from practice earlier. The green is Undersea Green from Daniel Smith. It's my only Daniel Smith color, but I do love it. Most watercolors that I use on a daily basis are handmade colors from Mrs. Hand Painted, from Boulder Colors, from KMS Watercolors. I hardly ever paint from a reference photo. Sometimes I will if I, for some reason, don't know what to paint. I'm sitting here and I don't know where to start. Then I'll look at a book of watercolor, or not a watercolor, a flower book, so reference photos, bouquets. I'll just open it up and I'll see yellow flowers and say, oh, that's something I want to paint. Or I might combine a couple of flowers, rose and a lavender piece together. So that's where I go if I don't know what to paint, lacking inspiration, that type of thing. But that doesn't happen often. It's like once every couple months where I just sit here and I don't know what to do. So this basically started with a color. I said I want to do a peony. It could look like a rose, right? It's sort of a fantasy flower for me. Yeah, I think that answers that one. A lot of you that have been joining me in my recent lives know I just start with a color and then go from there. And I do tend to work with a limited color palette. I think that that's something helpful just for my brain. Like 3 or 4 colors would be a lot. Typically, it's just 2, and then I might go back in with a gold or ink, something like that. Yeah, that just works for me. Thank you, Poppy. So I actually really like how loose this is. I like the shapes of my petals here, and I like the leaves. And then, yeah, oh my God, I didn't know you were here. I only saw you on IG. I don't think I've ever promoted my TikTok on Instagram, but it's so cool to run into you here. I used to do lives on Instagram every day last year, and then my students talked me into doing TikTok, so I'm here. Oh my gosh, I still want to paint more with you. So this one I think is going to get some metallic detail somewhere. I'm going to let this completely dry. I did, let's see, these poppies, fluffy pigeon here. Christine, I actually don't know. I know Bindi's here. Seema from Simply Seema is here. What I really should do is mention that I even have a TikTok over on Instagram. I should encourage people to come over here. So I think I'm going to do another wreath, maybe some different colors. I'll do a green and red wreath. There's so many of you here. I feel like I should just keep painting. So we'll do one more wreath. I've got my jar to give myself a guide. Hi, Zena. Okay. Thank you, Tess. If only my students felt that way when I was teaching chemistry. I feel like only a handful listen to me. Especially when I'm swishing the water brush. Okay, give myself a little guide. I think I'm going to do this one with 6 brand of brushes, my go-to brush. So Princeton round brushes. My favorite is the Princeton Neptune. It's just the fact that I'm doing a smaller card that I'm going to use a smaller brush, but this is my absolute go-to. And then the Petals brush I enjoy for leaves. And then recently I've been in love with this pointed oval. But let me get some leaves going. Something a little blue green, some dark leaves, and maybe some red berries. I think that's what we'll do. Do you buy a set or separately? For my brushes, I buy them separately. So I've only bought a few brushes. For my watercolor club at school, I got a set on Amazon, a bunch of round brushes, relatively inexpensive. For myself, my mom gifted me my Princeton Neptune. That was a little present that I absolutely love. I bought a filbert, hardly use it, but I bought it anyway. That was separate. And then I have a couple Princeton sets that I won as giveaways. So that enabled me to try some different brushes that I didn't have, like the Petals brush. So they have sets sort of for florals and things already pre-done. So that might be something interesting to get, since you'll get brushes you wouldn't ordinarily think you'd love, and you might find really good uses for. Okay. Almost done with my leaves, and then I could think about adding some berries. Anybody else have questions? Mama Robs, you're wanting to start, not sure where. You paint with the colors that you love. That's where you start. You enjoy seeing the colors blend and bleed. So cut up some paper, give yourselves lots of little minis to play with, and you start. I'm thinking, some of you heard this earlier, but I'm thinking of doing a little watercolor workshop, virtual, like a Google Meet join in on Saturday morning. I haven't thought through all the little details or anything yet, but I'll make a meet and share it in my bio, and you can join if you have the time. And I'll just kind of be a little bit like this, a little bit of an introduction so you can paint along. So I'll go through how to paint a certain flower, and then we'll practice with that. I am self-taught. Lots of YouTube videos help me out. There are a couple workshops that, like free workshops that I joined, and again, it's the practice. So I want a red. I'm gonna go for my berry color from Mrs. Hand Painted. I have all my paints organized now. You know, Shelby, I tend to get comments on my nails. I've painted my nails for longer than I've painted with watercolor. And I just recently got a nail brush. A friend sent me one, and that stepped up my nail art game. I used to use a toothpick. But for some people, it was obvious that I was going to end up painting at some point because I did my nails so often. Thank you. Definitely try again, yes. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not good at watercolor. Practice will make you better, no matter what your starting point is, right? Supplies could be something that's hindering you. Yeah, the paint could be. If you get better quality paints, it might boost it a little bit. Okay. Do you mix your own colors of paint? Sometimes I will. Sometimes I've got a single color that I adore. So this particular red, it works for me when I want to paint berries. So I just use it as is. But maybe if I wanted to add a little shadow, I'd add a little purple to it, a little bit of blue, something like that. A little bit of green if you want to get it a little bit muted down. So I have certain colors that I enjoy mixing and certain colors that I enjoy just from the pan. Leslie, you got KMS paints and love them. Metallics, can you tell me what they are? I'm pretty sure I'll know based on the color names what you got. Her golds are something amazing. I do have a special place in my heart for bolder colors. Yes, so bolder colors, I'd say, are one of my favorites. I'll show you, let me see, where do I have my palette? I've got some some colors here. These are all paints made from plants or food waste. So that's made from garlic. That's made from holly, arugula. Some of them I know from the top of my head. Some of them I don't. So these are the Fantastic Plant set. So Boulder Colors over there. I have a lot more than just that, but that was on hand. KMS for metallic paints. They're my favorite. I have a few other makers, like what I'm using right now. This is from Mrs. Hand Painted. Paper. Oh, a green palette. Yes, I love her greens. Canopy leaves, moss. Those are some of my favorite ones. So back to paper. I like bow hung. If I want to paint something that I know is going to look good, I paint on bow hung. I have all my paper behind me because my dog loves to eat paper. So, oh, there she goes. I opened the drawer and she knew. So this is my favorite for working on. That texture is lovely. I think that's the paper that I currently have a painting listed on Etsy. It's using that paper. Other papers. Strathmore is pretty good. That's the watercolor card that I'm working on right now. I like their hot pressed paper. I know I don't use it often, but when I do, I like that. And then I had this pad over here. So it's kind of your drawing, painting, a real, yes. Mercado, I've painted the flower using paint made from that flower. So hollyhocks, I think that I have, it should still be on my desk. This is my favorite go-to everyday paper, so I don't feel bad about painting 3 times in one day if I'm using this Village. And I'm not normally a landscape person, but you've already seen kind of 2. One that has florals. This almost counts as a floral. I'm hoping that a certain person is not on my live that I know, because this is going to be a gift for him. Hollyhocks, painted with paint from Hollyhocks. I love that. I painted foxglove with foxglove, and that sort of sparked the idea. And this was yesterday. Yeah, this was just my everyday paper that I've been using. Same pointed oval brush. Okay. Do you want to see my vintage book that I've painted in? I showed that to you one time a couple weeks ago now, but I could get that. I don't really have anything else in front of me. Got this one. The book is pretty cool because the pages end up acting as sort of like a hot press paper, very smooth finish to them. Don't have to add anything before you go straight on and paint, so that's nice. And it feels like you have endless pages to paint on. What I've been trying to do with that one is, since it's a biological science educator book, it's got pages on birds and pages on leaves types and sort of how to prepare samples and things. So I try and find a word on the page and then go from there as to what to paint. So let me go grab that. It'll take me just a second. I don't think for 100 gifts I could do that, G. I am not good with magic. Sorry to disappoint. Let's see what I can open up to. Okay, quick little landscape. I have to kind of feel where the pages are warped a tiny, tiny bit to tell me where I painted on before. So this was in just some flowers. I think it said something about different types of flowers. So I said, okay, flower page there. Some Icelandic poppies. Just some practice there. Butterflies. One of my favorite pages. Don't exactly remember where everything is. I should have taken some notes on which pages I've painted on. So this is a fun one. This is sort of a sketchbook for me now because I stopped painting in sketchbooks a while ago. And then I went loose leaf, and sometimes I miss it, but since I'm getting requests for selling my art, it's better that I'm not using a sketchbook. So yeah, you could find a book that you are willing to paint in. You could still see through, so you don't have to feel like you're not going to be able to read that page again. I think there was one in here with there we go, a round bottom flask. Since I'm a chemist, that just made sense to me. Same with this one. There was a hummingbird in here. I want to find it. Maybe I should go back and flip through what I've done and make a little note of what's on what page. I think it is a nice idea. Oh, this one happens to be dandelions. So different stages of growth. Okay. Getting to the end, I think, of this live. I'll be back tomorrow. Still have to think about when I am in the week. Oh, here we go. I knew I needed to find that hummingbird. I think that's it for today. So I'll be back tomorrow painting with you. And then I'll try and put together something about the workshop for the weekend. I paint at about 4 p.m. Eastern every day. So right now it's 5 p.m. Eastern. I've been live, I think, for almost an hour today. So I don't typically paint for that long. Tomorrow I'll probably paint a card and then paint some florals, and that'll be it. This was a bit special. We had a lot of people on and lots of questions, and I didn't feel like going early. And then workshop, maybe 10 a.m. Eastern, something like that. I'll have some more information, I think, tomorrow. I'll put that together for you. So I hope to see you again soon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now. No problem. Bye, everyone.